Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday. I survived the Magic Kingdom. Some of the NFL teams survived their Week 8 slate. We see some players who are going to be lost for the year, some who are new faces in new places. Dennis, what else is new for this 2024 NFL season?
You know, we're just along for the ride. It's the script writer's world, and we're just living in it.
Well, we're going to dive in and look at the games, and we will talk about some of the breaking news. We had a trade, a player announced out for the year, and a prominent player benched, all just today. So who knows what's going to happen the rest of the week. But first up, Philadelphia Eagles traveled to Cincinnati. Bengals had an early lead, but the Eagles won going away 37-17. Dennis, what do we make of Jalen Hurts? He started the season a little bit slow, and his passing probably isn't exactly where we had hoped for fantasy and for those of us that roster Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. But another 3 rushing touchdowns, did throw a passing touchdown, have played a pretty clean game. For fantasy, he seems like he's exploding again.
Well, as a rosterer of Jalen Hurts, I like it. You know, keep vulturing those touchdowns. Get those 1-yard runs. Let me see. Hurts is sitting at what is?
Well, I'm going to see how many rushing touchdowns. He's at 8 passing touchdowns to only 4 INTs. He has 6 rushing TDs already. So 14 total TDs.
I'm a fan. Unfortunately, if I roster A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith or Saquon Barkley, a lot of what he does takes away from them. You know, Barkley was RB3. He's getting a lot of yards, but he's got 5 rushing touchdowns. I think Hurts has 7 rushing touchdowns, doesn't he?
He has 6.
I wonder what I saw.
Hold on, wait, maybe I'm missing a game. Oh no, yeah, you're right, 7.
So, you know, if that was, let's say if Hurts had 4 and Barkley had 8, you know, then you're feeling great because Barkley's sitting at what? RB3, give him a few more touchdowns. Now he's going to catch some passes. He's going to be productive. It's a powerful offense. And really the guy that I think gets the short end of the stick by and large is Devonta Smith. So as much as we like Devonta Smith and as good as he is, and he would be, I think, a dominant wide receiver on about 25 other teams, unfortunately, he's behind A.J. Brown and on a team that will sometimes throw the ball 20 times or less because they run it so well. And, you know, I will say they do have a narrow pass funnel. It is Brown, it is Smith, and the occasional target to the tight ends, but they don't go a lot deeper than that. You know, Barkley will have some games. So I think if you have Jalen Hurts, you're going to keep riding him. You're going to keep throwing him out there and let him keep racking up those games. And you're just going to have to accept there's going to be some games where maybe he doesn't get the rushing touchdowns and only throws the ball 25 times. They do go for big plays a lot, and that's good, but there'll be a stinker or two along the way.
Meanwhile, the Bengals now 3-5, but a woeful 0-4 at home. Joe Burrow still talking about he believes they can still get to 10 wins in the playoffs. To you?
I mean, stranger things have happened, and Burrow, by and large, can, will a team to some victories. I think T. Higgins getting injured again doesn't help. Chase is wide receiver 1, and that's good for fantasy. They have that connection, but Higgins at 32, and now he may miss another game or two. I don't think Yosevich is ready to kind of step up the way Tyler Boyd used to as the wide receiver 3 there. I'd like to see him get Chase Brown a little more volume. Brown is running back 28 or 29, and Moss is 31. Let's keep tilting it heavier towards Chase Brown. But Burrow is he is for fantasy QB6. And, it's one of those things where you have to look at the consistency. 5 of his 7 games, he's been under 20 points, and 3 of 7 games, he's been under 15. So there's a couple big weeks in there that are propping him up a little bit. You're not sitting him if you roster him in a 1 QB league. You're going to play Joe Burrow.
If Higgins misses time, though, it could be good for Mike Gesicki, who went from good to dead and maybe swinging back to good. Next up, the other teams in the AFC North did battle. The Cleveland Browns getting the surprise 29-24 win over the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens becoming the latest top AFC contender to the day after a game they did not make a trade, this time acquiring Deontay Johnson from the Carolina Panthers. They would be very familiar with him from his time with Pittsburgh. But how does he fit into this pass offense?
So he's an outside receiver, and Rashad Bateman has been playing really well on the outside. Zay Flowers, 7 of 12 for 115 last week, but didn't get in the end zone. I don't know that they need Deontay Johnson, but Lamar did throw the ball 38 times last week, so maybe there's something to them adding another receiving weapon. I like Johnson as a talent. I think he's going to get lost between Bateman, Flowers, and Derrick Henry and Lamar running the ball a lot of weeks. And Henry only had 11 carries this week, which is a little bit out of character for how the season has been going. He had great results, very efficient, 73 yards, 6.6 yards a carry, and a touchdown. But you've got Mark Andrews, you've got Isaiah Likely. I mean, the receiving core of the Ravens right now, are they flipping the switch and going pass heavy? I mean, they've got the personnel now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it hurts Bateman the most, although 5 targets, only 1 reception yesterday might have made them be thinking about this. I'm not super bullish about what this does for Deontay, and I'm not super bullish. We'll have to see it play out. I think Flowers is probably the one I still like the best, but I don't know.
I mean, they're a 2 tight end team, and so they just don't run. I don't have the numbers, and if anybody's listening has access to any of those advanced stats, I would bet they're one of the heaviest 2 tight end and lightest 3 wide receiver teams in the league.
Yeah.
And unless there's something we haven't heard yet, like somebody's gotten injured, then it would make some sense. If Bateman or Flowers is going to miss some time, I mean, you always want to make your team better. And what they got Johnson in a 6th for a 5th.
I mean, I I think it's a good NFL move. I just don't know that for fantasy. I was already low on the consistency of Ravens pass catchers. I was starting to feel better about Mark Andrews. But now, I want to see what
Now
this
I'm
does
nervous.
with Deontay Johnson. You were almost to a place where you were flexing Rashad Bateman, but he doesn't have a great game and they trade for a receiver. So I also wouldn't run out and pick up Nelson Aguilar off waivers just yet. Meanwhile, for Cleveland, Jameis Winston, 334 yards, 3 touchdowns. He now has 4 passing touchdowns on the season in a game and a quarter, where Deshaun Watson had 5, all of 6 and 3/4 games. Watson never went over 200 or even got to 200 yards passing. So is this more about Jameis Winston or the play calling duties flipping to Ken Dorsey?
I think it's a combination of both. Jameis is a gunslinger. We know that about Jameis. As a Browns fan, I know, and I'm a Lions fan too. I get it. Give me hell. I like 2 teams. As a Browns fan, I wanted Jameis to play because I felt like the way Watson was playing, we didn't have anything to lose. But the reality was Winston had only started 10 games in the last 4+ seasons. So you didn't really know what you were going to get out of him. And when he did start all the time, he could be an interception machine. And let's face it, there were a couple interceptions that were dropped. And if Hamilton hadn't dropped that one this week, and then they turned the next play or next couple plays, got it in the end zone, we'd be singing a different song probably. Yeah, we'd be happy because he threw for 300 yards and a couple touchdowns, and Watson hadn't done any of that. But, I mean, Nick Chubb wasn't super productive on the ground. Foreman had good efficiency but few carries. Winston isn't going to run. Well, Watson didn't run. He was at least a better athlete. I love the breakout of Cedric Tillman, and that started with Watson last week. He looks like the real deal. And there were a lot of people when Tillman and Jalen Hyatt were coming out of Tennessee last year. They were like, hey, Tillman's the guy you want. Hyatt was the higher draft pick, but Tillman is coming into his own. He looks good. He's a big traditional alpha-bodied wide receiver, and it allows Elijah Moore to play more of the underneath stuff. And Jerry Jeudy, honestly, Jeudy had 8 targets for 79 yards, but it felt like with Tillman and Moore, it kind of felt like he was an afterthought.
As it should be. Next up, the Titans travel to play the Lions. Lions get the 52-14.
Did they?
52-14 victory for Detroit. We've seen Mason Rudolph for a couple of games now, and even though he gave them a spark the first game he came in, he does not seem to be the answer. What are we doing with the Titans?
I think when Levis is healthy, you got to play him. You've got to find out exactly what you got. Rudolph, he had a reasonably good game, but he isn't a great talent. He's started 15 games in 6 seasons. And one of those 6 seasons, he was literally the 3rd quarterback in Pittsburgh and was not active and didn't take a single snap all season. And then they kept him the next year, and then they let him walk. But, Rudolph is a journeyman at best. I think he's got enough talent that he's going to spend a few years floating around rosters as a 2nd, 3rd quarterback. But they need to see what they have in Levis, and then they need to go get a quarterback next year. Unfortunately, it looks like next year's draft class isn't the greatest for quarterbacks. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the Pickett season, but it looks like there's no like 3 guys that you're going to take at the top of the order, top of the draft that you feel can't miss.
Meanwhile, for Detroit, Goff only has to throw it 15 times, completed 12 of them, only 85 yards, but 3 touchdowns as the Lions put up 52 points. Goff is on a heater of late. How good is he?
mean, is he on a heater? He threw for 85 yards.
But his efficiency the last few games, and he could have thrown for a lot more. They simply didn't need
Right.
it.
It's crazy. I mean, it's great. He got 3 touchdowns. You love that. As a Lions fan, yes, I am a Lions fan. That's the team of my youth. The Lions as a team may be playing the best ball in the NFL right now. And we saw earlier in his career, sometimes Goff would try to play above his ability, and that led to problems. Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have surrounded him with a team that supports him and uplifts him. He doesn't need to be an elevator. He can just be good at what he's doing with Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta and Montgomery and Gibbs, and a really good offensive line. He's just got to make plays when he needs to make the plays, and he's making the right decisions right now. 12 of 15. You love to see that. You wish you wish there were more than 85 yards, but you take the 3 touchdowns, you take the 52 points, and you roll on to next week.
Next up, a battle of 2 enigmatic teams. The Arizona Cardinals go to Miami and surprisingly get the 28-27 victory. The Cardinals are a hard team to read. They had a lead but lost to the Bills. Then they bludgeoned the Rams, who were shorthanded. They lost to the Lions and the Commanders. They somehow pulled out a victory over the 49ers. They lost badly to the Packers. They eked out a win over the Chargers and the Dolphins, sitting at 4-4. What do you make of this Cardinals team?
I mean, they're at the top of the division right now, and that you just got to keep fighting on and stay at the top of your division to get into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. They squeaked it out this week. You want to see more consistency. Murray threw the ball 36 times for 307 yards. Harrison did well, 6 for 111. I'd love to see Trey McBride start to get in the end zone. Connor didn't have a very efficient day. I think Michael Wilson is starting to consistently be a mid to high level flex player. I think they've built some trust with him. He just doesn't get quite the volume you would like. I think Murray is, I forget where, I don't know if I wrote down where he sits where his ranking is, but, he gets by, he makes some plays with his legs. He's up and down. I think QB8. Yeah, I think last week he had like 5 stinkers and 2 great games it was just.
He has 4 games at 20 or more and 4 games at 14 or less, or at 16 or less.
So that's what you get with him, and sometimes he saves it with a rushing touchdown, and
no games below 10 points though. That is actually remarkably consistent.
That's where the rushing comes in. That the rushing gives him that floor. He gets 50 or 60 yards rushing, and that kind of helps support him. Marvin Harrison is wide receiver 18, and he started off a little slow, had a couple nice games, faded a bit. I think his route running at the NFL level isn't quite as crisp as it needs to be, but he's coming around. I think he realizes he's got things he needs to improve, and he's working on being an NFL wide receiver. In college, he didn't have really any competition. So now he's out there and he's getting better every week. We just need to see him start to put it together and be consistent, put up this, 7 to 9 catches a week, touchdowns, 100-yard games.
It is a little deceptive to be 18, though. If you look at his points per game basis, he's wide receiver 33. I know the Cardinals technically, because of tiebreakers or whatever, currently considered first, even though there's a logjam. I still like the Rams and the 49ers better. I know they beat both those teams, but just don't know if I believe it.
It's one of those situations where the administration in Arizona, they built that team to play the teams in their division.
Yeah.
They go out and lose to other teams a lot, but they're playing well against their division.
Meanwhile, the Dolphins, another loss, slipped to 2-5, but they did score 27 points. Tyreek Hill 6 for 72. They got Devon Achane going. They got Waddle going a little bit. Was this at least a step in the right direction?
It was. Tua is the straw that stirs the rum runner, which is, I think, the official drink of Miami. His ability to throw the ball opened up the running game for Achane and Mostert. Mostert with his 2 touchdowns. Achane caught 6 passes for a touchdown, rushed for 97 yards. Tyreek Hill, 6 for 72. I'd like to have seen a little more volume in the pass game, yardage and touchdown wise. But first game back, he ran a little bit. He slid, Tua, that is. But he got the ball to Hill and to a lesser extent Waddle. So the timing seems like it's still there. I think they're going to be a dangerous team as long as Tua stays healthy.
Meanwhile, on to the most surprising game of the day. The New York Jets went to New England, a team they smothered in week 2, and managed to lose 25-22. The Jets have now lost 5 straight games. They are 2-6. They are technically last in the AFC East. What do you make of the Jets?
Man, the Jets are a mess. I think Aaron's, like, mentally, he's still in his darkness retreat. He got Devontae, and that should have cheered him up. I think you keep firing up Wilson. He's RB or wide receiver 6, and Hall is RB7. And I think Hall might move up the ranks because Rodgers checks the ball down a lot. We saw it at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career and at the end of Tom Brady's career. They became these check down quarterbacks. They'd still take some shots, but they didn't want to get hit, so they were getting rid of the ball quickly, and that often meant to the running backs. So I think that watching them kind of be kind of discombobulated, I don't know if it's, while Rodgers was having issues with Hackett, now he's having issues with the new guy, with Todd Downing, and I think Rodgers just needs to retire. Can he still do the functions of a high-end quarterback? He can throw the ball far. He can throw it fairly accurate, and stuff. But I think it seems like it's just gotten too weird around him that he's not connecting really with the people he used to connect with that he brought in. And it's just not getting to, he's not an elevator anymore. And the offensive line, I think, gives up a little too much pressure for him. I think Adams and Conklin are going to be startable weekly, and I think Adams and Wilson will have some weeks where they flip. I just think right now Wilson is the more explosive player and has the potential to put up the bigger numbers more consistently. It's kind of like Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs down in Houston, sort of what they were. I think that's Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. So I'd like to see, as somebody who doesn't roster much of Breece Hall, I might have one share. I'd really like to see them stop letting Braylon Allen vulture him. As much as I like Braylon Allen, when you get to the 1 yard line, give the damn ball to Breece Hall.
Meanwhile, it's about mid-season, so we're going to be checking in on some of our rookie and second-year passers. Drake May got knocked out with a concussion, but was hanging in there with the Jets before he got knocked out. And Brissett actually comes back, gets a little revenge, and helps lead them to the win. But he got a rushing touchdown, didn't have a lot of passing. But how are you feeling about Drake May at this point?
Well, I'll feel a lot better if he can stay healthy. May looks pretty good. They need to invest in some offensive linemen. They need to improve the protection. But Ramondre Stevenson and Hunter Henry, I think, have been pretty consistent. Stevenson's a little up and down, but he's the guy by and large. Quietly, though, Kayshon Boutte has played the most snaps of any wide receiver over the last 3 games. It seems like he might be kind of rising up and becoming that guy there. Is he going to be, a wide receiver 1? Probably not. But on a team with questionable wide receiver depth, he could be that team's wide receiver 1 and put up good numbers. He was a highly regarded college prospect and had a very good breakout freshman season. So from all the, the analytics people, they'll tell you, well, that portends well for his success in the NFL. His last couple of years in college weren't great, kind of fell apart there. But maybe Boutte kind of steps up and becomes a solid guy. Maybe he becomes somebody that can be that wide receiver 2 when they add, a Marvin Harrison or a Malik Neighbors type of wide receiver to pair with him, and he can be the Devonta Smith to AJ Brown there.
The Atlanta Falcons traveled to Tampa Bay, got the 31-26 victory. Another 4-touchdown day for Kirk Cousins. Dennis, after a slow start, he is up to QB 11 on the season. Are you feeling good about Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, he's got great weapons in London and Pitts and Mooney, and then Bijan Robinson. I think it's easy to get a little squirrely when you look at the rush numbers and see that Tyler Algier only had 1 fewer carry. But I think Algier is going to get some run when the game is run heavy. I think they like him, and I think he's good enough. But when they're passing a lot, you're going to see a lot of Bijan Robinson. He had 7 targets for 7 catches and 43 yards. Bijan is the 3-down back. Tyler Algier is the change of pace back that's good enough to get a whole series. So Cousins has weapons, and the Atlanta offensive line has gelled pretty nicely, and he's come a long way from that first game when it was all shotgun and he was a little nervous about the ankle. So if he can keep racking up 3 or 4 touchdowns a week and 275, I think you keep rolling him out there.
Meanwhile, Buccaneers embracing life without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. What did you think of their passing game?
He threw for 330 yards, and he was QB6 on the week without Evans and Godwin, so that's good. Cade Otton was the tight end 1. 9 catches, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
17 receptions for 181 yards the last 2 weeks. I think he's the big beneficiary in the passing game.
But for all of Rachaad White being the quote-unquote passing back, Bucky Irving was 7 for 7 for 40 yards. White did go 5 for 6 for 38 and a touchdown. And then Raheem Jarrett came off the injured list, popped into the game, caught 3 passes for 58 yards. He's a guy out of Maryland, another Big Ten guy. And I felt like he had a shot to be the 3rd guy this season, and then he got banged up. And then Jalen McMillan was playing really, really well. I think Sterling Shepard was a little bit disappointing this week. I think we had all kind of started to buy into the Oklahoma narrative with him and Baker. But I mean, Baker went out and
not we all
threw it 50 times. And
yeah, well, they're going to have to keep throwing. They got Kansas City coming up this next week. The Green Bay Packers moved to 6-2 with a 30-27 victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jordan Love injured again, goes out with a groin injury. Malik Willis comes off the bench, 4-5, 56 yards. Touchdown pass led him to 10 points and the victory. Can they keep rolling with Willis potentially stepping back in?
So Willis is a different style of quarterback. And, he's not going to throw the ball a ton. They face a red-hot Lions team. But Detroit did lay an egg in week 2 against Tampa. So, really, Green Bay has to get through this game, and then they have a bye week. Willis is completing 74% of his passes, and he's got 57 yards rushing in his 2 starts. But he's only throwing the ball 16 and a half times a game. And in weeks 2 and 3, they were playing the Colts and the Titans. So 2 teams with not great offenses. It's a little bit different this week. I think Willis is going to have his work cut out for him. On the plus side of things, with Wicks and Watson and Dobbs and Reed and Kraft and Josh Jacobs, they have weapons to be able to possess the ball and shorten the clock. I do think they'll be overmatched next week against Detroit if Willis is the quarterback, but stranger things have happened.
Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence, the team is only 2-6, but he's actually quietly up to QB 12 on the season. How are you feeling about him?
So he's spreading the ball around. It doesn't help that he lost Christian Kirk this week. I know Kirk wasn't getting a ton of volume, but we've seen in the past what he can do. So it felt like at any given time, Kirk could, start to go on a run and get some volume. Brian Thomas Jr. is the real deal. He's sitting at wide receiver 7 on the year. And Evan Ingram, since he's come back, he's getting I think he's back on his 1,000-yard pace from last year. He's just providing that short area stuff. Now, if they can get ETN back so they can balance a little more passing game with Tank Bigsby's bull running, because he runs hard, man. Ultimately, I think Trevor's still a QB2. I don't think you want to start him as your QB1, but he's making some good decisions, and Brian Thomas Jr. is making him look good.
Yeah, he has been playing a lot better. Be curious to see Brenton Strange had 5 for 59. I'm wondering if that's a product of Kirk going out, maybe a little more 2 tight end.
Peterson ran a lot of 2 tight end in Philadelphia with Goddard and Ertz, and Strange played pretty well with Evan Ingram out. And so he may feel like, well, we don't really have I want to put my best 4 pass catchers out there. And if Brenton Strange and Evan Ingram are 2 of them, then by all means.
Houston Texans hosting the Indianapolis Colts got the 23-20 victory. Anthony Richardson struggled mightily, 10 of 32, 175 yards, touchdown, interception. That yardage total kind of inflated by a 69-yard big pass play to Josh Downs. Had to ask out of the game for a play down the stretch because he was feeling tired. He has now been benched in favor of Joe Flacco. What do you think of the move?
So I'm an old guy. We've established that. I think you bench him for being tired. I'm like, dude, you're one of the premier athletes in the United States. You don't pull yourself out because you're tired. You keep fighting. You just, I don't get that. No. But it's been bad. He's really, really struggling throwing. Like it's been like, I think I'd rather have Kenny Pickett bad.
Yeah, only completing 44.4% of his passes, 958 yards, 4 TDs, 7 INTs. Not good.
Yeah. I have, so over the last couple of years, I have, like last year, I had the 101 in several drafts, and I felt like my team wasn't close enough to competing that I needed to take Bijan Robinson. And so I traded from the 101 to the 102 and took Anthony Richardson in approximately 3 drafts. That's not looking great, to be honest.
Yeah, not on a good route. Meanwhile, the Texans got a win to go to 6-2, but when is a win a loss? It's when one of your best receivers blows his ACL, and that was the case with Stephon Diggs, who is now out for the year. Nico Collins already on IR, and they play on Thursday night. What does this pass offense do now down two of its big three receivers?
Well, Tank Dell season, baby. Tank Dell season.
If you can get him going. I mean, he only had 4 freaking targets.
So they've got to get through this week. And Mixon has been carrying the team on the ground. He is third in the league with 100.6 yards per game. But then John Mechie, one of pedigree out of Alabama, stepped up, caught 3 of 4 passes. Cade Stover, 2 for 3 from the tight end position. Dalton Schultz, 4 for 6. You know, it'll probably be Xavier Hutchinson, Tank Dell, and it looks like Robert Woods is back, and John Mechie. Not the best, but guys that have been around. You know, it looks like if I'm Houston, I almost wish I'd have re-signed Noah Brown.
Yeah,
instead of letting him walk.
Mechie should be a popular waiver pickup, but I'm with you. I like Dalton Schultz. He was tight end 10 last year, had real good chemistry. I think he and Dell are the ones they're going to have to lean on in the short week. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers hosting the New Orleans Saints and got the 26-8 victory. Dennis, it has not been bright days with Derek Carr out for 3 straight games. They may get him back this week. How much have they missed him?
A lot. Like, I was hopeful for Spencer Rattler. Like, in rookie drafts, he was like my late round target. Once you get past the top 6 guys, it's like, wait, take Rattler, let him sit on your bench. Maybe if he can go back to riding the pine and just getting better at the NFL level with NFL coaching, in a year or 2, maybe Rattler could be something. But right now, it doesn't look good. I don't know. I don't know that you should be putting him out there over Jake Haener. I mean, to be fair, Haener was there last year, and if they're like, no, we're still rolling with Rattler, you got to ask yourself, well, how flipping bad was Haener? If they're watching Rattler and going, no, he's our guy till Derek gets back. You know, I won't say I'm losing hope for Rattler. I'm just saying the road got a bit longer.
I missed this one last. Needs a sweet Nico Collins back, don't we all?
Yes, we do.
Don't we all? Meanwhile, for the Chargers, it feels like this passing game may be starting to come together. Got some good plays from Joshua Palmer. Seemed to have found something with Will Dissly. Got it going with Ladd McConkey. Are you liking the way the Chargers are developing this passing game?
You know, so they had a slow start to the season. They averaged 136 yards passing before the week 5 bye. They've since come out of the bye and they're averaging 271 yards. J.K. Dobbins is still playing pretty good. You know, he doesn't put up big numbers against teams with good run defenses, but he's consistent. He can get, he eats up clock. He's got a nose for the end zone. He's an okay pass catcher. He had 7 targets last week, but caught 4 for just 11 yards. So, you know, he's catching them behind the line of scrimmage. You need to get him down the field a little more. You know, Ladd McConkey's sitting at wide receiver 22. He's had 3 double-digit games. I think he was off. He didn't, you know, the first, 4 games, they only averaged 136 yards passing. So McConkey wasn't getting a whole lot of action then. So he kind of, like, I think last week was like his legitimate breakout week. And at wide receiver 22, we've seen Justin Herbert be really, really good. The question is going to be, will the offensive line hold up so that Herbert doesn't get a beaten every week? And if it does, then I think with McConkey, Palmer, Dissly, Dobbins, I think they're going to be Quentin Johnson, if he can stay healthy. I think they're going to have an opportunity to make a little bit of noise in the passing game.
Yeah, and they should hopefully get Quentin Johnson back next week. Buffalo Bills went to Seattle and clocked the Seahawks 31-10. Second game with Amari Cooper on the lineup. He didn't do much, but we saw another big game for
Didn't do
Shakir.
anything.
Yeah, another big game though for Shakir and Coleman. Do you think just having Cooper out there is having a positive impact on these guys?
Yeah, I think so. The downside is, Cooper only had 2 targets. And so whether that was a function of, the adrenaline from the first week was worn off. And, we saw last week, the talk was how on the touchdown to Cooper, where Shakir is like having to tell him, hey, Cooper's looking at Shakir going, I don't know what Josh is calling. And Shakir's telling him, just go deep kind of approach. I was expecting more out of Cooper, and I didn't buy into Shakir this week. And so I sat him in the show league for Jerry Jeudy. Now, I got lucky, and it didn't cost me the game, but Shakir by far outperformed Jerry Jeudy, and I don't think I'm going to do that again. I think Shakir, at worst, is a flex-worthy candidate with wide receiver 2 upside. The Bills have increased their passing volume. They're over 30 passes a game in 3 of the last 4. I think adding Amari Cooper to that team will continue them down that will then open things up for James Cook and Ray Davis and Josh Allen, for that matter, in the running game. I think Amari Cooper gives them an established alpha wide receiver that they didn't have. I know I was pitching Shakir as an alpha potential a la Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where'd it go? 9 for 107 this week. The potential is still there, but having that 6'3", 210-pound wide receiver with 4.4 speed, that does something for a team.
Meanwhile, the Seahawks, no DK Metcalf. Their offense looked incredibly flat. Metcalf still dealing with that knee injury. No lock to return this week, and they face a tough divisional matchup with the Rams. What do you make of this Seattle passing game without Metcalf?
Well, it really hurt the running game. They averaged Walker and Charbonnet both averaging just 1.3 yards per carry. The offense didn't move the ball as a whole, only 29 pass attempts and 17 rush attempts, 5 of those by Geno Smith. On the plus side, Walker did have 4 targets, so that was good. Smith and Jigba was 7. Walker had 5 targets. Smith and Jigba was 7, caught 6, but there was just no yardage volume on 20. He threw the ball 29 times for only 212 yards. No touchdowns and an interception. DK Metcalf just provides a different type of threat. And it's easy to say, well, DK scores those long touchdowns because coverage breaks down. When you're 6'3", 230 pounds and run a 4.3 40, that breaks coverage. And Geno just has to get the ball out there and let Metcalf go chase it. And he does. And they don't have anybody on their team that can replace that. As fast as some people thought Laviska Shenault was, he can't replace what DK Metcalf does. So they need to get a little – I think without Metcalf, they have to be better in the running game, and they just weren't this week.
Next up, the Carolina Panthers traveled to Denver, where the Broncos got the 28-14 victory. But Bryce Young did get to start, looked remarkably better than the first 2 games of the season, 24-37, 2 touchdowns. Did have 2 interceptions, got picked by Pat Surtain, but did get a touchdown over on Pat Surtain. Overall, do you think it was an improvement for Bryce Young?
It almost feels like maybe last year they should have sat him down for 3 or 4 or 5 games and let Dalton play based on how much he's improved since the beginning of the year after sitting a few games behind Dalton. You know, he looked serviceable. Did he look like he was somebody that's going to be able to carry a team? No. And with Deontay Johnson out, Jalen Coker stepped up. Miles Sanders caught the ball well out of the backfield. Xavier Legette had a touchdown. I was disappointed in the performance of Jatavian Sanders. Really could have used some more production out of him at the tight end position. But we see some of the young players now kind of starting to build some chemistry together. And maybe, just maybe, this time off is what Bryce Young needed. And we'll see. Do I expect them to go on a 5 or 6 game win streak? No. But if they can play competitive and Young can complete 63, 64% of his passes, and even if he's slightly negative in the touchdown to interception ratio, then I think that gives you some hope. What you can't have is you can't have him go the rest of the way with, 3 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions and a 52% completion percentage. That's not going to be good for him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Hopefully they will stick with him. Bo Nix, meanwhile, after a slow start, 11 touchdowns total with only 1 interception the last 6 games. The Broncos have been 5-1 during that stretch. How are we feeling about Bo Nix?
I don't know how you're feeling, but he's sitting at quarterback 9. He almost feels like he's a must start. He's pushing for that. With his mobility, what he brings to the table, he only rushed for 4 yards this week, but he did have the touchdown. But we've seen throughout the season that Nix is a pretty good runner. And if you go back to his college days at Auburn especially, that was one of the things he did. We need him to get down the field, throw the ball. You can't just keep throwing those tunnel screens and passes at the line of scrimmage. Sutton, 8 for 100. Love it. Huge Cortland Sutton fan. Troutman had a good game. Little Jordan Humphrey caught 4. They're lacking like high end. I think Sutton is a wide receiver 2-3 kind of guy. They need to round out the receiving core. And I think when they do, then Nix is gonna, I think he can be like Kirk Cousins in the aspect that he's not an elevator like a Patrick Mahomes, but he's a guy like Cousins or Jared Goff that if he has the weapons, he's generally going to make the right decision.
Michael says it's not the Panthers' year. Tepper needs to be less involved. Amen. Let's just hope he lets his poor coach have another year because they're trading all their assets again, which, I just still don't know how you're developing a QB in an offense if you keep getting rid of everything.
A good quarterback does just fine with a new offensive coordinator every year. That's what makes him a good quarterback.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Kansas City Chiefs remain the league's only unbeaten team, 7-0 with a 27-20 victory against the Las Vegas Raiders. Debut for DeAndre Hopkins, saw 3 targets, caught 2 for 29. How do you like his fit in this offense?
I don't think we saw enough to really know. He played 32% of the snaps. We know what DeAndre Hopkins' skills are. He's a contested catch guy. He's going to get open in the short area. He's going to fight for the ball. You throw it up. He thinks he's going to win every battle. And I think that's going to work in Kansas City. You've got Xavier Worthy to take the top off. You've got Travis Kelce to just be where Mahomes needs him. And Kelce's, after a slow start to the year, seems to be back to normal, 10 for 90 for a touchdown. Kareem Hunt grinding it out on the ground. We should be getting close to Pacheco coming back here in a couple weeks. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the running game when Pacheco gets back, because Pacheco was looking pretty good in the receiving game, but we've seen over the past few seasons with Hunt that's what Cleveland did with him, is they used Hunt as the receiving back. I don't know that that's what you want to do when you have Isaiah Pacheco. But we'll see. You had mentioned earlier last a couple of shows ago that you felt like Pirine might be the odd man out when Pacheco comes back, and I don't know that I disagree with that. But I do think a receiving core of Kelsey, Worthy, and Hopkins is fairly formidable when you've got a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes.
Meanwhile, for the Raiders, it's trying to get a look at some young players. DJ Turner, 4 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. Only had 4 targets, but he seems to be kind of stepping in there a little bit. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, he's what? I think he's 27 years old. I've picked him up in a couple spots because if he's going to be starting in the NFL, you might as well have him on your bench. Somebody has to play wide receiver there. He's a reasonably good athlete, quicker than he is fast. Not too tall. He's only about 5'9", but he's about 208. So when you've got Jacoby Myers and Trent Tucker, Christian Wilkerson, there's room for DJ Turner to have some flex appeal, especially when we've got 4 or 6 teams on a bye. I think probably more so. But, I mean, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell in the quarterback room, the running game didn't do squat. Madison had 14 carries for 15 yards. And you thought maybe, well, that would push him to go back to Zamir White, who had 2 carries for -1 yard. They need more from their running game. When you've got a quarterback like Minshew, you can't just expect him to carry the team.
Next up, the much anticipated battle of the 1st and 2nd overall pick did take place as Jayden Daniels was good enough to go. And boy, what an ending. 18-15 victory for the Washington Commanders over the Chicago Bears. Dennis, kind of a rough game for Caleb Williams. There's been a lot of comparison lately of him to Daniels. I'm wondering if Chicago has some second thoughts. 131 yards. They did have the lead with 25 seconds to go, but it wasn't because of a great game from him. He did have 41 yards rushing on 10 carries, but only 10 of 24 in the pass game. That pass game's been kind of up and down. How do you feel about Williams?
Being an NFL quarterback is hard, and he's a rookie. He's going to have some good games. He's going to have some bad games. You want to see him continue to get better. At least he didn't check out of the game tired.
Yeah. It's year 1, so maybe you save that for year 2.
Right. So Washington had the 12th ranked defense versus the pass. And I think that stands for something. That's a pretty good defense he was going up against. Yeah. So, he's got weapons. If they get some pressure on him and make him doubt what he's seeing, Dan Quinn is a pretty good defensive mind. And so I think being able to put defensive players in positions to confuse a rookie quarterback, I would expect Dan Quinn to be able to do that.
Meanwhile, Jayden Daniels gets the victory, goes for 326 yards and a touchdown, although 52 and a touchdown came on a beautiful Hail Mary. How did you feel about Jayden Daniels?
I have significant rostership of Jayden Daniels, and I was excited to see him play so I didn't have to play Marcus Mariota, where I picked him up to make sure I had a second quarterback. Daniels is playing really well. He's playing like the number 1 overall pick. And I know he was number 2, 326 yards passing. He only had the 1 touchdown on the Hail Mary. The Bears defense isn't a slouch either. And so, they held Brian Robinson to just 16 yards rushing. Daniels did have 52 yards. So he had to run a little bit. And with the gimpy ribs, that was probably something he worried about a little bit. You don't want to keep getting hit. But he's getting the ball to McLaurin, Zach Ertz. Noah Brown is establishing himself as that second wide receiver there. And then they've got McCaffrey and De'Ami Brown as their 3 and their 4. But I don't know how often that they're going to be relevant. I like Brown as a flex. I like McLaurin as a wide receiver 2 with 1 upside, and Zach Ertz as a tight end. I think he's in that catch and fall phase of the Jason Witten arc, but he gets open and seven catches for 77 yards. I think he'll take that.
Next up, the 49ers hosted the Cowboys and got the 30-24 victory on Sunday Night Football. Dennis, the Cowboys now 3-4 on the season. What do we make of this Cowboys team?
Well, they're all in. That's for sure. They're all in. I think that they're all in the garbage can except CD Lamb. Was wide receiver 4, and he's going to continue to dominate targets. 13 catches on 17 targets. It was CD Lamb doing CD Lamb stuff. Jake Ferguson, 8 targets, 6 catches, but only 23 yards. It wasn't. I don't think it was a great performance by Dak. It was a lot of forcing the ball to CD Lamb. The running game is virtually non-existent. Doesn't matter if it's Elliott or if it's Cook. Even when Dowdle was in there, he's better than both of them, but he's nothing special. Ferguson's sitting at tight end 18. He hasn't been consistent. You would like to see more. And Dak is QB 19. So, yeah, you're starting him in Superflex, but he's just not putting up the kind of numbers that I thought. I thought this was going to be a season where Dak was throwing the ball 50-plus times.
Nathan asked, what does Dak get back to last year? My response in the chat when I put, with no run game, a suspect line, and poor passing game depth, I think he could get back to top 12, but I don't think he's going to be where he was last year.
Yeah, I'm not counting on it.
Meanwhile, for the 49ers, Jordan Mason started the game, went out with a recurrence of that shoulder injury. Isaac Guerendo, 14 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown. The 49ers are on a bye this week, but Mason's still dealing with that shoulder injury. Not sure, how good he's going to feel in 2 weeks. Not sure where Christian McCaffrey is going to be at. If you were looking at, hedging your bets on waivers, how are you feeling about Guerendo?
I think that you pick Guerendo up and play him. I think you play him, even if you think Mason is going to play some. He looks good. He's a smart player. This is the second time in, I think, 3 weeks that he's had a touchdown, and he's went down inside the 5 to run out the clock instead of score the touchdown. And, there's something to be said for a player that's that smart. And then you add in that he's 230 pounds and he runs a 4.3 40. He may, if McCaffrey just can't shake the injury, he may supplant Jordan Mason just because he's bigger and faster. And Mason's not a little guy, but it just goes back to what running backs can do in this offense if they understand how to run in that offense. And I wouldn't have expected, based on Guerendo's college performance, he had a lot of injuries. He wasn't super productive. I was not in on Guerendo. It's like they went to Shanahan's lab and drew him up specifically for that offense. He just steps right in and rips off big chunks. It's crazy.
On to Monday Night Football, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the New York Giants, got the 26-18 victory. Dennis, we wondered what the split would be like in the backfield when Devin Singletary came back available. And you know what? It is Tyrone Tracy's world, and we're just living in it. 20 carries to 2, had 145 yards and a touchdown. Is he now a must start every week.
I think so. Until he's not. I had a game going last night in a standard league. Like we were neck and neck. I had George Pickens and Russell Wilson, and he had Tyrone Tracy. Those 2 touchdowns of Pickens being called off, and that 45-yard touchdown run from Tracy just did me in. Tracy looks good. Yeah, I had concerns about the switch from wide receiver to running back. We've seen it over the last several seasons with guys like Antonio Gibson and Tony Pollard, and it's had mixed success, and none of them have really been able to step up and be the workhorse running back. Tracy looks like that guy. He runs the ball hard. He breaks through the line. Excuse me. He's fast. He looks great. I don't see any. I know that Singletary was quote unquote their guy in the offseason, Hard Knocks or whatnot. But if I'm Brian Daboll, I got to have a talk with Devin and say, look, man, you're still my guy. Go get me a Gatorade. I'm going to watch this other dude run.
Yeah, and Tracy he definitely looks good. For Pittsburgh, we wondered what the Harris-Warren split was going to be. Last year, it seemed like Jaylen Warren was maybe becoming the better back, but Najee Harris really seeming to take control. Last night, 19 carries to 9 has the edge, 114 yards, had a better average on yards per carry, also had more targets and receptions than Warren. How are you feeling about that backfield?
Considering that I roster significantly more Najee Harris than Jaylen Warren, I'm feeling great. Najee looks good. I don't want to say he's limited in what he can do, but much like Derrick Henry, he's a particular style of back. Much like Devin Achane, he's a particular style of back. And if you put him in the right offense and you've got a good offensive line, and I think Pittsburgh's offensive line is improving, and you're able to have a quarterback that can keep the defense off balance enough so that they're not just putting 8 and 9 guys in the box, then Najee Harris is going to perform reasonably well. He's running hard. That hurdle he had where he went over the dude, that was beautiful. And as long as, he can keep that up, he doesn't get injured, you got to keep riding him. I think with Jaylen Warren, it was weird because like the first half, it was like Najee go for 9, then Najee go for 7, a couple pass plays. Now they're down inside the 20 and they put Jaylen Warren in. And I was like, wait a minute, why are you taking out the 235-pounder when you get inside the 20? But Najee held up. He did what he was supposed to. He ran hard. He racked up good yardage, caught the ball when he was called upon. I think right now they're in a situation where the two of them are going to coexist. I think with Arthur Smith at the helm of the offense, they're going to try to be – they're likely to be one of the teams that is as close to a 50-50 run-pass split as any team in the league. And the way the two of them are playing, Najee is an RB2 with upside, and Warren is a flex with RB2 upside. Ride it out.
Before we get out of here, Thursday Night Football, the 6-2 Houston Texans, the 2-6 New York Jets. We talked about how woeful the Jets are and how depleted the Texans are. What are you expecting from this game?
So with Houston going up against Sauce Gardner and company, without Stephon Diggs and without Nico Collins, it's going to be a challenge. It's the number 4 versus the number 5 pass defenses and the number 15 versus the number 19 run defenses. I think we're going to see a lot more Breece Hall and Joe Mixon than we are anything else. And, Garrett Wilson will get his, and Devontae Adams will get his, and Tank Dell will get his.
Maybe Devontae Adams will get his. Doesn't look good so far.
But it feels like one of these classic 1914 kind of games. It doesn't feel like a barn burner. which means now that I've actually put that out into the ether, we're looking at a 41-38 game probably. I just think, Stroud is QB 15 and Rodgers is QB 14 on the year. They're not playing like we had hoped. Maybe Rodgers is closer to where we expected but most people had Stroud as a top 5 quarterback. I think Stroud is going to suffer a little bit this week with the depleted wide receiver core. Houston's got a really good pass defense. So Adams and Wilson are going to have, and there's no Alan Lazard. So Adams and Wilson are going to have their work cut out for them. I do think that they make some plays, but I think ultimately the 2 best fantasy players in the game are going to be Breece Hall and Joe Mixon.
Yeah, I'm still taking Houston in this one. The Jets just suck.
I know they do, and I really considered changing it. My preseason pick was the Jets, and I'm for lack of judgment, I'm going to stick with it.
I mean, their losing streak has to end sometime, or Jeff Ulbrich might be the second Jets coach fired.
CJ Stroud.
I just think Houston has better coaching, and there's just a bad energy for the Jets. It's gross. I'm kind of happy about it.
Then go into a dark room.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is getting what he deserves. That'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday with a preview of the rest of Week 9. As a reminder, the Steelers and the 49ers are the 2 teams on a bye this week, and I think this is the last time that there's only 2 teams on a bye until Week 13 when no teams are on a bye. But we'll go back to 4, and then we up it to 6 pretty soon here. So enjoy the plethora of lineup options you might have this week.
Chaos.
We will preview all the rest of the Week 9 games on Friday. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.